I'm going to start by looking at the blessing before Kriya Shema, which in my edition of the Art Scroll starts on page 88 or 89. It's page 88. I was once at an international conference promoting Jewish learning, at which there were hundreds of participants, and a very famous, very learned speaker said the following. This blessing before Kriya Shema, it says, the second sentence, "Our Father, our King, for the sake of our forefathers who trust in you and whom you taught the decrees of life, may you be equally gracious to us and teach us. Our Father, the merciful Father, who acts mercifully, have mercy upon us." Look at this introduction. Our Father, the merciful Father, who acts mercifully, have mercy upon us. Wow. What's coming up must be very, very important to have that kind of introduction. And what is it? Instill in our hearts to understand, to elucidate, listen, learn, teach, safeguard, perform. Well, understand, elucidate, learn, listen, learn, teach. That's all about understanding Torah. What's something wrong?
I'm just going to get a bigger cinder.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm okay. If you're getting it from me, I'm okay. Okay. I'm all right. I'm not going to use it for long. The heart of it all is Talmud Torah. And he said, you see how important Talmud Torah is. If our petition for enabling us to study and learn and understand the Torah gets such an introduction, it's got to be a very important commandment. Where else do you have such a petition to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a particular commandment? That was his introduction to the centrality of Talmud Torah. So I happened to mention this to Rabbi Meiselman, and he said, I recommend you keep reading. Oh, when you keep reading. Let's see. Understand, elucidate, listen, learn, teach, safeguard, perform, and fulfill all the words of your Torah and teaching with love. Enlighten our eyes in your Torah, attach our hearts to your commandments, and unify our hearts to love and fear your name. Maybe the introduction doesn't stop with the Talmud Torah. Maybe the introduction with the extravagant petition goes all the way to the end. And the end goal is loving and fearing Hashem. So maybe the emphasis on Talmud Torah, particularly as somehow uniquely superior to all the other commandments on the ground that has such an introduction, is a little short-sighted. The last thing in the list, which you might think of as the epitome, is loving and fearing Hashem. Maybe the study of Torah, understanding of Torah, teaching of Torah, and even performance of the commandments might be stepping stones to achieving love and fear of Hashem. Maybe that's the goal, and that's what justifies the extravagant introduction. Now, this is a complicated subject, but as a matter of fact, the Zohar describes the 630 commandments as Taryag Itin, which in Jerusalem Aramaic means strategies. The commandments are strategies. What is a strategy? A strategy is a plan by which you achieve something else. You don't strategize in order to strategize. You strategize in order to get something that you want. So the 613 commandments are called 613 strategies. It means they're not self-justifying. They're not an end unto themselves. The goal is something else. And it says the Zohar, it's Zvekus. being attached to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And arguably, love and fear or awe of God are the dynamics of the attachment. They are the attachment for which everything else is a means. This would demote study of Torah greatly in terms of that phraseology. Now, I want to focus on a very specific question about love on the one hand and fear and awe, as we'll explain. It's really a complicated or complex situation. They are both divine commandments. It shouldn't be that the Torah contains commandments that are incompatible, that it's impossible to fulfill both of, or fulfill the both of them simultaneously. Would be almost paradoxical for the Creator with infinite wisdom, infinite understanding, to set up a set of rules which can't be simultaneously performed. So we have to raise the question, is there a problem in performing both love and awe simultaneously? And if there is a problem, we have to look for a solution. Yeah?
How come that is a problem? You know, there's some mitzvahs which an Israelite can't do, but a Levi can or a Kohen can. So, for example,
I'm not understanding your word. There are some mitzvahs that what?
that Yisrael won't be able to do because he's not a Levi or he's not a Kohen.
But that's not a contradiction. He's not faced with doing two things which contradict one another.
So what do you
Why is that relevant to what I'm talking about?
He could love at one point and then fear at another point. Isn't it?
But that's not what you said. And that's a proposed solution, and it's not a perfectly adequate solution. Now let's start over again. There's no contradiction in distributing mitzvos among various agents. Every army is run that way. Every company is run that way. The orchestra has different instruments. No one plays all the notes. There's no contradiction there. But if you give two rules to one agent and tell him he's got to fulfill both, and it's impossible for him to fulfill both, then you have a problem. And you say, well, you can do this one Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and that one do Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You could say that, but then that's a solution to a problem, number one. It's not obvious that God intended these mitzvos to be only part of the time. Indeed, in the tradition, they're called mitzvos temedios. They're mitzvos that are continuous at all times. So it's something which needs attention, especially since the Rambam, when he describes in Yeshivat Torah, yes, I left out the noun on purpose. I'll tell you what he says, and then after we hear what I think the solution is, we'll come back and read it again. This is chapter 2, paragraph 2 in the laws of the fundamentals of Torah, Yeshivat Torah, base. What is the way to love of Hashem and yira? Now, yira means awe and it means fear both. Sometimes it can mean either one, but here I believe it means both. What is the way to awe and fear of Hashem, love and the fear of Hashem, and awe of Hashem? When a person concentrates on God's actions and His creations, which are wondrous, great, and he'll see God's wisdom. Well, I won't qualify, but it needs qualification. That has no limit, no end. Immediately, he loves, praises, exalts, and has a tremendous desire to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seeing the wondrous and nature of his actions and the Chokhmah in them. Yes, I changed that. The Chokhmah in them. He has a tremendous desire to get to know the source of these actions, to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As Dovid said, Somer Nafshi le'Elokim l'kel chai, my soul is thirsting for God, the God of life. Now, when he analyzes these things, enters into the investigation, atzman, miyad hu nirtal achrav. Immediately, he is repelled backwards. V'yare Yifached, he's afraid. Yodeh shehu birya ketana shvela, afela, he knows he's a small, dark, clouded creature. Omeid, b'das kale, standing with his poor understanding and minimal understanding. Liftei tomim deim, in front of he whose purity and infinity. So, the Rambam here describes a kind of pendulum-like procedure. On the one hand, he's drawing close out of desire to draw close to the one whose greatness and wisdom he perceives. On the other hand, when he does get more understanding of God's greatness and God's wisdom and God's wondrous powers, he then compares himself to God and realizes how insignificant he is and how clouded and dark he is, and he feels that he's out of place. He feels that there's no way to connect, and he feels threatened by the gigantic distance between himself and the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and he's propelled backwards. So you have a picture here that partly he's drawn forwards, and then he's propelled backwards. This then would generate the question. A certain well-known person who had a reputation for scholarship criticized someone else on the grounds that this type of description couldn't be the ultimate description of a person who is successful in his spirituality, because this would mean that love and, on the one hand, and awe and fear on the other hand, could not be achieved simultaneously. He'd be living a pendulum-like existence, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not present two commandments which can't be fulfilled entirely, especially if they're designed to be unlimited in time. It's not one's in the daytime, one's in the nighttime, and one's in Chol and one's in Shabbos. They're just commandments for the person. So he criticized that person, didn't mention the Rambam directly as I remember, and it was like, when I was coming in and I didn't know very much, I was struggling with this subject. Now, I think a clue is in the words of the Rambam that I read, but I didn't emphasize. He says this chapter is, what is the way to love and awe of God? He doesn't describe a person's condition when he has achieved love and awe. He's describing the process of achieving love and awe. And maybe what that critic described was only a critique of the final state of having achieved it. But the Rambam wasn't talking about that. The Rambam certainly is not talking about it. He's talking about the way in which you get to those two final endpoints. And maybe there's a way, having achieved them, that you can have them both simultaneously. Just the method of motion is a back and forth motion, because each process calls forth an opposite response. So I want to suggest, by the way, the Zohar says that love and awe are the two wings with which a mitzvah ascends to God, as if we're like a bird with two wings flying up to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Well, a Zohar is infinitely deep, but on the surface, where would it be if it didn't go up to God? What happens if it doesn't have wings? Baal Shem Tov was once invited to speak in a non-Orthodox synagogue. He had a reputation some places revolutionary, who knows how far it'll go. So he said to the representatives, I'm sorry, I have to decline your invitation because your synagogue is a house full of prayer. Rabbi, house full of prayer. How poetical. Why would that be your reason for not speaking in our synagogue? So I'll tell you why. Because when a Jew does a mitzvah, he does it well, he does it for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that mitzvah is born with two wings. And that wings enable the mitzvah to ascend to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same thing's true with prayer. But when it's not done well, when it's not done for the right reason, it's born without wings. And it doesn't go up, it's lying on the floor. If I come into your place, I'll be stepping on all the prayers on the floor that didn't go up. That's why I can't preach in I can't come and speak in your synagogue. So now, let's take it and ask, what would it mean if a person does a mitzvah and it doesn't go up? It would mean it doesn't connect. If the Zohar tells us the purpose of the mitzvah is to connect, and this action you did didn't connect, it didn't connect. It didn't fulfill its purpose. So without love and awe to carry the mitzvah aloft, the mitzvah doesn't connect. It means you don't connect. It means that love and awe are the means of connecting to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what it means when you go on in the siddur to the end of the sentence, that the goal is not the learning itself, and not even the keeping of commandments itself, because the Zohar says the keeping of commandments is only a strategy. It isn't the goal. And the paragraph goes on and says, the goal is ultimately to achieve awe and love for Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the connect. So that's, and the Rambam expands on this idea greatly, that the whole purpose of the Torah ultimately is to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu in that way, what we would call dveikus. Okay, but so now how are we going to describe the possibility of its being simultaneously fulfilled? My suggestion is in the following parable or analogy. Let's imagine you get an invitation to a birthday party. Now, there's a set of cases here, depending upon who issued the invitation. It could be a neighbor from down the street, whom you see every couple of weeks and say hello, or it could be for a next door neighbor with whom you have interaction, or it could be from a member of your family, or it could be from, let's say, the mayor of your city. You have a big city, you have a dedicated mayor, someone who everybody respects and honors, and the city has in it 1.5 billion citizens, and he's having 16 people at his birthday party, and you're one of the invitees. Or it could be the king. Obviously, the value of the invitation is the value of relating to, associating with, the one who issues the invitation. Now, how does it work? The more glorious he is, the more noble he is, the greater he is, the more precious the invitation. Obviously. The more ordinary he is, he's just an equal of yours, not that glorious an invitation. So now, how do you feel when you get the invitation? He chose me. Wow. I wonder why. I wonder what he saw. After all, he's head and shoulders above almost everybody else, but he chose me. So the very fact of his distance from you, the very fact of his overwhelming greatness above you, makes the invitation more and more precious. Now, you assume he didn't pick your name as a slip of paper from a hat. He had a reason in choosing you. Now let's expand on the reason. People who emphasize freedom and self-determination and autonomy, I asked them to meditate on the following possibility. Picasso is looking for an assistant. What he wants the assistant to do is make sure he has paints and easel and brushes and they're all in good repair. He wants him to set up his materials, a place where he wants to paint. Picasso says, you can watch me paint. Watch how I paint. Picasso says, I want somebody who's a painter. You could paint in your off hours and I'll comment on your painting. But you'll come with me and do with me and set up it over the way I want it. You'll be on constant call. It's a year's position. Can you imagine someone applying for that? Well, if you have this slavish, naive, superficial appreciation or misappreciation of independence and autonomy and freedom, that's slavery. Go where he goes, do what he wants, set it up where he wants, you're just taking orders. Yeah, taking orders from Picasso, thank you. I'm watching him paint. He's watching me paint and giving me suggestions. Any serious painter would give his eye teeth to spend a year with Picasso. Because he's so great. Now, the year goes by, and George is there, he's doing the job, and from time to time, Picasso says, that's okay, but you could do it this way, you could improve it that way. The year goes by, and George learns a lot. He feels it was a very precious experience. And then Picasso surprises him. George, we've had a nice year together, and you've made progress. I have a suggestion. Let's paint pictures together, you and I. You'll paint the background, which is just the accompaniment, and I'll paint the foreground, which is the subject of the picture. We'll do them together. We advertise as Picasso and George. They'll hang in the museums. Picasso and George. Right? How do you think George will feel about that? He wouldn't be thrilled. He wouldn't realize, my whole life is turned upside down. Picasso and George, I'm immortal. Picasso's work's going to go on forever. I'm not signing on to that. I'm just describing how he would feel. Because of the great distance between Picasso and him, the invitation into a partnership with Picasso is very precious. If he weren't that much greater, the invitation wouldn't be worth as much. And he's chosen George because he's observed him, because he's worked together with him, because he appreciates what George can contribute. So his feeling for Picasso, his feeling of joy in being with him, his acceptance by Picasso, his participation with Picasso, all of that is dependent on the distance. The distance is what creates the profundity of the feeling. I think that the seeming incompatibility between Av and Yira, between loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu and, on the other hand, having awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is when you don't factor in a relationship. Rambam doesn't mention a relationship here. All he mentions is that I'm responding to his greatness and wisdom on the one hand, and then I'm responding to the fact of the distance between me and him, so that I belong in his circle or in his environment. Both of them have nothing to do with the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. If you are in that condition that the Rambam describes, then you are on the derech, you're on the way to achieving love and awe. But the ultimate achievement of love and awe is to achieve a condition of dveikus, of attachment to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Now, of course, nothing you can do can lead you to that attachment unless the Kodesh Baruch Hu invites you to it. You can't dictate connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, my hand is outstretched to you. I'm offering you this. And the medium of the connection is ahava and yira, love and awe. So the two become complementary to one another. They reinforce one another. The more awe you have, then the more in the relationship is appreciated and generates love. So I think that that's the way that you can see that ultimately they'll be compatible, and they are the wings with which mitzvahs go up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they carry the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Now, a good illustration of this is Avraham at the Akedah. Avraham is asked to sacrifice his son Isaac. There's an infinity of material on the subject. I'm not going to elaborate on it tonight. I just want to point out one thing. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him at the last minute, don't slaughter him, because I now have made known that you are someone who's willing to sacrifice your son. That's all I wanted. And you have to really be willing. It wasn't a joke. Abraham took the knife to slaughter his son. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to make that known, so it's over. And the words that are used in the text are, Ati adati ki yireh Elokim ata. Now I have made known that you have yira for me. Awe for me. Ata yodati ki yirei Elokim. Yud Reish Aleph. Yirei Elokim Ata. Yira in Hebrew is awe. Not clear what I'm saying? Yeah, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. So, the commentators ask, Abraham's relationship with God was based on love. His descendants are described as Zera Avraham Ohavi, the descendants of Abraham who loves me. Why here is it described in terms of awe? So, again, there's a lot. I'm just skimming off the top. Here, Abraham was put to a test whose purpose he could not understand. He couldn't understand it because he had been promised that Isaac would be his continuation, that his descendants would come into the world through Isaac. And at this point in his life, Isaac had no children. So he was faced with a contradiction. On the one hand, God says, Isaac will be your continuation. On the other hand, God says, slaughter him, sacrifice him. So much so that the commentators say whatever he did would be okay. He can't make both statements true. He cannot do that. It's a contradiction. He made his choice however he made it, but he was faced with a contradiction. And the Midrashim talk about this. Now, love requires understanding. You cannot love an X. You cannot love a mystery. It's only through the qualities that a thing has that you can come to love. And here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, maybe up until now, you've been operating on your understanding of me. This is the 10th out of 10 trials. You had 9 trials before this. Those 9 trials, you could understand why it was being done. You could understand what is being accomplished. And therefore, you could do it out of love. But now I want something else. I want you to be able to perform what I tell you to do. I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. Perform what I tell you to do without understanding. That's why the conclusion, the denouement, is because you're doing this out of awe of me. Awe can carry you when you don't understand. All this is pretty common among the commentators. The Gemara in Sota makes an additional remark. It says, Abraham's awe was born out of his love. They aren't two separate features. They aren't two separate gestures. They aren't two separate elements of a relationship. No. It's born out of his love. Now, how can awe or fear be born out of love? Here, it's in a sense like the opposite of what I was talking about. I was explaining how once you have awe, plus the invitation to a relationship, you can come to love. Here, the Gemara says, since his basic character is to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the text describes his achievement as an achievement of awe, this has to be an awe that grows out of love. So, one explanation that's given, where the word for yira is taken to mean more fear than awe, is this. Let's suppose that you love someone, and the love is maybe the most precious thing in your life, or one of the most precious things in your life. Now something threatens that love. That will be the enemy. That will be something terrible. It's threatening something vastly, vastly precious to you. So the very preciousness of the love can lead to the fear of losing it. So now, if you receive a command, and the command itself is not understandable, so in the context of the command, the relationship of love by itself doesn't carry you to success in the context of that command, because love requires understanding. But if you think this command is coming from the one that I love, and by failing it, I might sacrifice the love. That fear of losing the love could carry you where the direct love itself wouldn't carry you. So this is another way in which you can at least come to fear from love. The other possibility, or now I want to take Yira to be awe, is for someone to love, and to love on the basis of understanding, but then to come to grips with the fact that the understanding isn't perfect. Even in human relationships, understanding isn't perfect. Even in human relationships, understanding isn't complete. So how, in a love relationship, do you come to grips with the fact, not because the other person is hiding, not because the other person is secretive, keeping something out of view, just the depth of people is, I would say, unlimited. Human beings, in essence, is a soul, and the soul is a chelek elokam imal, which doesn't mean, I keep repeating this, but I hear it so often that I think it's important to stress. Chelek elokam imal, a piece of God on high, does not mean that God is a salami that you can slice up into pieces. It's poetry, meaning to say that in this world, the thing that's created in this world that most expresses what God is the soul. And therefore, we don't expect to understand the soul. Some aspects yes, but some aspects no. Just like we don't expect to understand the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So now, let's say in a human relationship, and you're deeply in love with someone, the other person is in love with you, you share this precious love, but there's some things there that you don't quite get. I think what you say is, all of this that I do understand, all of this that I do get, isn't another person from the part I don't understand, not detached from the part I don't understand. The person I'm in love with is a whole, and all the elements integrate into a whole. It's just that I'm seeing certain sides of the whole, and I'm not seeing other sides of the whole. But I'm interacting with the whole. So whatever that thing is that I don't understand is playing a role in the development and presentation of the part that I'm in love with. And therefore, that part is precious to me because it's integrated together with what I love. And therefore, even that which I cannot love, I can't love it because love requires understanding, I can appreciate it and value it and want to be connected to it. And that desire comes out of my love to transcend the love. It comes out of my love to go beyond what the love itself can deliver. That would be a yira growing out of ahava, where yira means awe. It's the appreciation for and commitment to that part of the object of love that I can't understand and that can't be part of what generates the love. So now we have these two ways, starting with awe and achieving love through the idea of a relationship. And then I think really it's mediated by the relationship. When you have the relationship of love, which is definitely a relationship, that can lead you to appreciation for the parts that you don't understand, which means appreciation and a conscious connection with the awe, which is a relationship with the part that you can't understand. In both cases, it's relationship, which is the medium of resolving the problem of how love and awe can operate together. That's the third element, where you have an incompatibility between A and B. Usually when you have an incompatibility, if you add more information, it gets worse. The more information, the more likely it is to be contradictory. It's not always so. It's not a contradiction. If you add a third element, that creates the possibility of reconciliation of the other two. And that's what I think that relationship does here. So then, like the Zohar says, the whole purpose of all of the commandments is to foster that relationship. Now, each of them has its own challenge. But if we ask, which is the more difficult? Which should we put our emphasis on? Where should we start? There is discussion of that in the sources. And I wouldn't say they all obviously agree. I'll express to you one approach. When the people hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to them with the 10 pronouncements at Sinai, immediately thereafter, they say to Moses, never again. Yes, God spoke to us, and yes, we survived it, but the experience was so excruciating, we haven't got the confidence that if it happens again, we will survive. We don't want to have it again. You should be the intermediary. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will speak to you, and you will speak to us. That's what they ask for. Now we have on record 2 responses to that request, 2 reactions to that request. First of all, Rashi quotes a midrash describing Moses' response. In the verse, when they speak to Moses, they say, "Ve'at tidaber eleinu." You should speak to us. The word "at" is feminine. But the midrash asks, why would they refer to Moses with the feminine? And the midrash expresses Moses' point of view. You weakened me like a woman. Okay, I know the politics and the sociology and all the rest. Leave it aside. Try to ignore it. Give yourself a mental exercise. You weakened me like a woman. Wouldn't it have been better to draw close to God out of love and hear from Him directly rather than hear from me? So Moses was very disappointed with the people's reaction. Okay. What about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reaction? HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reaction was ecstatic. Heitivu kol asher diberu. Everything they said was good. Who could guarantee, God says, who could guarantee that they would have this heart with them? To have yira for me forever, and they'll keep my commandments. So if you pay attention to the words, Moses was disappointed because they didn't respond with love to draw close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is overjoyed because they did respond with yira, with awe and fear. And that's what He wanted. And that's why there were the pyrotechnics. Who needs the thunder and the sound of the shofar and the ground trembling under their feet and the fire on the head of the mountain? Who needs all of that? Because Baruch Hu was talking to them. So because Baruch Hu says, you're upset with the fact that they didn't want to draw close out of love. What did I make the whole show for? I made it so they should be afraid and stay in awe of me. That's what I wanted. Who would guarantee that they should have this heart for them forever to keep all of my commandments? So the message here is that although the ideal is ahava, is love, and the Gemara in another place, I'm going to quote the moment, for Moses, awe and fear was trivial. You learn that when you're 6. When you're an adult already, you should be on the level of love and wanting to draw close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said no. Maybe for you it's that way, but not for other people. I wanted the key experience of making the connection with Klal Yisrael to be an experience of yira, of awe. There's another place in Dvarim where it says, Ma Hashem shoel imei ki im liyira. What does the HaKadosh Baruch Hu ask from you other than that you should have yira? From that yira, other things will come. But that's what He asked from you directly. And the Gemara says, He's only asking for yira? Why did Moses put it that way? Is yira a little thing? Or it says for Moses was a little thing. That's why when they weren't willing to draw close out of love, Moshe Rabbeinu was disappointed. What? Yira? The Baruch Hu says you're making a mistake. Now, I think a reason, I shouldn't say the reason, ever. A reason is because yira is something that you can expect that people will achieve to a certain extent normally and naturally. It's not so difficult, it's not so unnatural. Appreciate the overwhelming, enormous, inestimable greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Av is much more difficult. Let me just take you through ABCs for a few minutes, not long. Kodesh Baruch Hu is the creator of the universe. The current estimate is that there are 10 to the 22 stars, or maybe they've changed it the past couple of years. That's a 1 with 22 zeros. That's a lot. How do they come into existence? Let there be. Done. You know, for comparison, I'd like you to try it with a grain of sand. Just make one by saying it should become this. Let's see, try, give it a try. Grain of sand. For Kodesh Baruch Hu, he says, let there be, and there are 10 to the 22 stars. That's pretty impressive. And then, sometimes I imagine asking IBM, I want you to design a robot for me. This robot should be able to engage in complex construction projects with other robots of the same kind, and to be able to extract energy from the environment, and it should be capable of reproduction, have various sense organs, and all the programming should go into the head of a pin. I think even IBM would want, more than a week to turn it out. An ant has all of that, and its head is much smaller than the head of a pin. Much smaller. The estimate is that the programs must be written in molecules. IBM is not up to programming molecules, thank you. That's an ant! Not a human being. Is it difficult to be overwhelmed? And this is only what we know. The other things we don't know. Overwhelmed by Kodesh Baruch Hu's power and wisdom and engineering and beyond understanding, beyond belief. And think, what am I compared to that? Boy, oh boy. Not even a nothing. To achieve Yira is something that's natural and normal if a person would just pay attention and look at the world honestly. Ahava is something else. For Ahava, you have to have an understanding of, I'm going to say it as best I can, you have to have an understanding of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. You'll tell me, but Rabbi Gottleib, you've told us 16 times, we don't understand what a Kodesh Baruch Hu is, we understand what he does. So why do you put it as understanding of Kodesh Baruch Hu, rather than of his actions? And the answer is because the Rambam writes those very words, and he writes them on the basis of a verse in the Torah, which is very hard to escape. Moses asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to share with him, to show him his ways, which means his principles of action. And the very next word in the verse is, Ve'edacha, and I shall know you. Show me your ways, and I shall know you. So learning HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways is a way of knowing him. Not something else. Not the paintings he painted or the projections he projected. It's a way of knowing him. The object of that knowledge is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Of course, what you're being told is, when you learn about his actions, you're not learning about something else. You're not learning about his clothes or his car or his estate or his paintings. You're learning about him. What are you learning about him? What you're learning about him is his principles of action. But the subject of knowledge there, the object of knowledge there, is him. That knowledge can carry love. But it's a job. Learning HaKadosh Baruch Hu's principles of action, seeing how they relate to one another and to the world, seeing how seeming contradictions are resolved, seeing what the hierarchy is between them, is a very complicated project. The Kabbalah, the Zohar, largely is just about that, about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Deeper than that, how the creation takes place and things like that, we can't get. So, and the Kabbalah is very extensive, very detailed, very highly structured, very sophisticated. So, Ahava, in a real sense, is going to be a tremendous project. And you'll have glimpses of it, the Rambam writes. You'll have glimpses of it. Some people, a few times in a lifetime, achieve it. The platform is Yira. And out of that comes Ahava. That's the way in which it is normally achieved. That's where one can start. Most talk about that as the the progress to achieve the two of them together. Even though it reverses the Rambam's order in what I read to you, that has to be explained separately. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, I see all of the countless things HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for me in my life. Isn't to have love for him natural out of that? I think it inspires both awe and, I guess, gratitude, which then, I guess, comes to me as love. Maybe there's a nuance that's different.
I hear what you're saying. I think you're right in what you say. I think the Rambam is pushing for a deeper level. Yeah, when you identify all the things that Kodesh Baruch Hu does for you and respond with love, I think that's natural. The question will be, how do you conceive of the one that's doing the giving? Could be that receiving such attention is a natural bridge to love, but not appreciating from whom the attention is coming means that the love is superficial. I don't know if, for example, a 2-year-old could tell the difference between what his parent provides for him and what somebody else who isn't his parent provides for him, because he doesn't know who his parent is, because there's a rotation system of taking care of him. All he knows is that it's coming to him. Furthermore, does he understand the 35-year-old adult who's giving it to him? All he knows is whoever it is, he's giving it to him. So he may love, but he has a very scanty conception of the one whom he's loving. That love is just, I say just, I don't want to belittle it, but it's a love that's born out of gratitude for the concern of the other and the benefit that the other is providing him with. But he has no, you can put it this way, he has no conception of the concern. He feeds me. He's thinking of turning me into a 35-year-old success. Do I appreciate that? He gave me a meal. I was hungry, I'm satisfied. I enjoyed the meal. Thanks a lot. I have no clue what his real concern is for me. So I have no clue who he really is and how he really relates to me. If I understood that, my love would be gigantically greater.
Wow.
I think that's, when you see things over time, when I saw the way my Rebbe Zatzal guided me to develop, and he had a different program for each person. He didn't have a single, and he sort of put me in circumstances that crafted me into the tool that he wanted to make me into, and he made a tremendous success out of my life, if I haven't left my own devices. And certainly was Hashgacha Pratis from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that, turned the corners. So if I think back, what he saw in me when I was 19 years old, and I saw when I was 40 where I had ended up, I had a much, much greater appreciation for who he was and what he meant to me and what he wanted for me, what he was doing for me, than I did when he was taking me in for a Shabbos meal, because I had no place to go, and schmoozing and giving me help. I had no clue that he had such a far-sighted, complete picture of where I should be going, what I should end up doing. So I think that the emotion of ahava is there, but the depth of ahava, which depends upon the understanding, isn't there. Rambam says several times, love goes according to understanding. The more understanding, the more love, because the more you appreciate what it is that he's doing for you, what it is that he cares about in you.
Thank you, Rob.
Anyway, that's my suggested solution to the problem. By adding the third element of a relationship, I think you can solve the problem of how Ava and Yira can perform together.